But anyway, let's get this going here. Here we go. A case for the super grid. That is my email if anybody would like to contact me. And this is my book. This is the world's littlest book on climate that I wrote a few years ago with the help of Dr. Peter Tons, who ran the NOAA lab for measuring global atmospheric carbon dioxide. If you want to get a free download, just grab that QR code. I'll leave that up there for you. And the idea of this book was not to write the world's longest book, because I think Dr. Michael Mann can certainly do that for us, but to write the shortest book so that perhaps people that do spend a few hours watching Sean Hannity and some of the other folks in the evening might take 10 minutes to actually get the facts about carbon dioxide and the impact it is having on global atmospheric temperatures. So if everybody's had a chance to get that, if not, Phil, we can make sure that we get that QR code out to everybody, or the actual website that you can download it. So first, just some real basics about climate, because after 48 years of doing TV weather, I've certainly heard more than once, gee, Mike, you can't even forecast to next week, let alone next century. So let's talk about that. Climate is a long-term average of conditions. Weather is chaotic and changes rapidly. You would expect Miami to be warmer than Denver in February. That's the climate of Miami. It could be that we have a downsloping Chinook wind here and it's 65, and they have a cold front in Miami and it's 55 on a given day, but that did not mean the climate changed. So therefore, it is easier to predict climate than it is to predict the weather. It's basic thermodynamics. If you add heat to something, it gets warmer. It's why day is warmer than night and summer is warmer than winter. An analogy that I like to use is that weather is like one play in a football game, and climate is the entire history of the National Football League. If it's snowing in New Orleans or snowing in Las Vegas, well, it's wintertime, and we expect more unusual local weather events as the climate system gains more energy. Global warming creates a steroid effect, and what that means is it makes droughts more extreme or add moisture, increasing the intensity of a flood event or a heat wave. And global heat balance is even more straightforward. Boy, when I watch these pundits on the talk shows talk about, this is really complicated, we don't know if these models work. It's not complicated at all. It's like the basic rules of the game. A touchdown is worth 6 points. A field goal is worth 3. The field is 100 yards long. So it's this simple, my friends. Heat in versus heat out. The amount of heat that comes in, shortwave radiation of the sun, versus the amount of long wave radiation going back out. If you add heat, it gets warmer. And with added CO2, we're trapping more heat. We're warming up the planet. It's that simple. Let's break it down here. Let's say the Earth is 4.6 billion years old, and let's scale that back to just 46 years. 8 months ago, the dinosaurs lived. Human beings have only been here for 4 hours. The Industrial Revolution began 1 minute ago. And in that minute, we have increased the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere from 280 parts per million to 425 parts per million. The rate of climate change is likely too fast for some species, and maybe many species, to adapt. Now, the miracle of fossil fuel. I also get this one, because life without fossil fuel was cold, dark, and short. Absolutely agree. Concentrated energy from the sun stored in the earth for hundreds of millions of years. And it's that energy density, much like a battery, that makes it so good for gasoline and jet fuel and fuel for electric power plants. But the rapid increase in carbon dioxide is changing the heat balance of the earth. We need every electron we can produce, but we need it with less carbon. And there's going to be a huge increase in the need for electricity because of crypto and AI and data centers, regardless of whether this new one coming out of China is way more efficient. We're going to see a huge increase in demand for electricity. Current predictions call for an increase of perhaps 75 gigawatts in the next 5 years. A gigawatt is the equivalent of a nuclear reactor. So we're going to have to develop new power resources and do it fast. Now, people talk about carbon sequestration, and let me give you some numbers on that. It's expensive and requires a lot of energy. Scrubbing the carbon dioxide from a coal or gas-fired power plant requires a plant that's 30% bigger. That's not very efficient. And the technology has not proven scalable. We add 100 million tons of CO2 into the atmosphere globally every single day. At the best price, and we're not even close to this, we would hope we could sequester carbon at $100 a ton. Currently, the best plant out there is in Iceland with perfectly ideal conditions because of geothermal energy and the volcanic soil, and the carbon sequestration cost is $1,000 a ton. But let's just say we could get it to the goal of $100 a ton. That means that's $10 billion a day to remove the carbon dioxide we put in the atmosphere. We add about 2.5 parts per million of CO2 every single year. So it would cost $3.65 trillion every single year just to stay even with global emissions. The numbers for carbon sequestration do not add up. And the upshot is it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle. So some solutions: renewables and nuclear energy, a combination of renewable energy and nuclear power. Renewable power is reliable on a large enough scale. It's always sunny or windy somewhere. Large-scale battery storage is expanding fast. Tesla, I'm throwing a bone to Elon, but there are other battery manufacturers too. We must improve our transmission system to move that power from source to need. How about nuclear reactors? Well, lower production costs, and I put in hopefully because it's very expensive energy. There's still the issue of nuclear waste storage. There are some other types of reactors. The lifter or liquid fluoride thorium reactor, much safer, no meltdown is possible. It's expensive and it's not currently available. And then there's nuclear fusion, the power of the stars. Very expensive, but limitless power. But of course, the joke is that fusion is always just 25 years away. But here's some good news. Battery technology is rapidly improving. There is one called Terrigen, which is out near Edwards Air Force Base. It is a 4,600-acre solar and battery facility located on the north side of Edwards Air Force Base. I've been there. It is a joint public and private and DoD project. Lithium-ion batteries provide up to 4 hours of power. There is a new one going in a little bit farther to the northwest of there called HydroStore. You may have seen this. They just got a $1.75 billion loan guarantee. Renewable energy compresses air, which is stored underground for future power generation, and the system can store energy from hours to several days. It will begin construction likely by the end of this year. Form Energy is an air-iron battery storage system. Battery basically uses oxidation to create the electricity and then recharges by reversing the rust process. Heavy, but you're not putting it on a car, you're putting it on the ground for utility scale storage. And iron and air are certainly not rare. This is a view of utility scale solar and wind in the Antelope Valley north of Los Angeles and just to the west of Edwards Air Force Base. And solar energy has become the cheapest form of power in the last 15 years, far cheaper than nuclear or thermal coal, geothermal, natural gas. It's the cheapest, about $60 per megawatt hour of power. So let's take a look at that. I checked this on the Grid Status website with the California Independent Systems Operator website. If you want to grab that web code, you can certainly look for it yourself. So the range throughout the day is $30 to $100 per megawatt hour. But let's go with that 60 that I showed you in the previous graph. That means if you used a megawatt of power for a day, that would be $1,440. And if you round it for a year, about $500,000. It takes right now about 5 acres of solar panels, batteries, roads, fencing, inverters per megawatt of electricity produced by a utility scale solar farm. So if you had a 1,000-acre solar farm, the value of that crop of electrons would be $100 million a year. Now, I'll correct that because the sun doesn't shine 24 hours a day. It's 50 million if you take an 8-hour sunshine period and 4 hours of battery storage, which is what we're getting now out in California. That means the value of that crop of electricity is $50,000 per acre per year. Let's compare that to what else you can grow on an acre of land. So I checked with both ChatGPT and DeepSeek and kind of did a combination of what they told me. You can get about $700 an acre for soybeans and about $1,000 an acre for corn. Alfalfa hay, which is the single biggest user of water in the Southwest United States, has a value of about $2,000 an acre. If you had trees once in your life, you could harvest them for $3,000 to $4,000 an acre. Pistachios currently in California are worth about $5,000 an acre. Almonds about $6,000. They also use a lot of water. Oranges about $10,000. And the most expensive spice in the world, saffron, has a value of about $30,000 an acre. The upshot is solar farming can be very profitable. And as I mentioned, it uses very little water. Look at the numbers on alfalfa and hay. Colorado River water consumption blows everything else away. So I want to give you an example of the impact of infrastructure, because we're talking about the value of improving our transmission system. So the Antelope Valley is north of Los Angeles by about 60 miles. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer and show you where we are. There's Lancaster. Over to the upper right is Edwards Air Force Base. And out in the areas to the west, that was agricultural land back in 2008. And not very effective agricultural land. It was too hot, too dry to grow the almonds and the pistachios. Didn't have enough water. But because of California energy mandates, they built 2 transmission lines there, the Tehachapi and the Barren Ridge transmission lines, to bring renewable energy down from the Antelope Valley into Los Angeles. That was $3.6 billion spent to build transmission lines. And the old adage from Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. So look what happens inside that orange rectangle between 2008 and today. That is all utility scale solar energy. That is over $60 billion in private investment. And who are the investors? Warren Buffett and Google and Duke Energy and the Walton family and Google, because power lines can get that $50,000 an acre worth of electricity from product down to market. And this is what it looks like in the Antelope Valley now. Transmission lines all over the place. Are they attractive? I don't think so, but they certainly are useful. And this is what the battery electric storage systems now look like. These didn't exist out there just 3 or 4 years ago. And now virtually every new utility scale solar field is going in with massive battery backups. And there's even more that's going to happen. California is adding even more transmission because they have an unprecedented need for new renewable resources. Now over $9 billion. I'm glad I don't pay electric bills in California. A lot of their high cost for electric bills is because of all of the fires they've had out there. And just this area alone, 60 billion, you got, that's a 17% return on investment. They spent 3.6 and it brought in $60 billion in private investment. So you're getting a great return on your investment. You may or may not be familiar with brownfields. That's not pristine desert land. That is previously developed land areas. And estimates are that there are 5 million acres of brownfield in the United States. Just 1 million acres of brownfield land, which is currently unproductive, would produce 200 gigawatts of power per year. That would be $50 billion a year in electricity. If we build the transmission system to move electricity from source to need, we could utilize these marginal lands. It's transmission lines that can make this marginal land valuable and productive. So we can solve our growing power needs and generate a great deal of wealth. There are 2 great past infrastructure projects in American history. In 1862, Republican President Abraham Lincoln signed the Transcontinental Railroad Act. And in 1956, Republican President Dwight Eisenhower signed the Interstate Highway Act. Neither of those projects bankrupted our country. Both of those projects transformed our country. This is the next great American infrastructure project. When President Trump signs the historic Great American Super Grid Project, an interstate highway for electricity, taking the energy from solar in the West and wind in the Midwest and moving it from source to need over a direct current, high voltage transmission system that could follow the railroad and interstate highway right of ways and be buried underground. We could call it, and I think this might get the president's attention, money and power, he could say. This project will bring prosperity and security, making America great. The Great American Supergrid Project will help middle and rural America. This big farmer came to me in tears and said, "Sir, you saved my farm because now I can grow electricity and grow my wheat and alfalfa." But they could choose. They wouldn't be mandated. And I make that a little bit of jest, but a farmer or rancher could choose to take less productive land on their property and grow electricity because it is worth a lot of money. It would be a huge job creator and a tremendous return on investment. This project will create jobs and keep America dominant as the world's greatest producer of all forms of energy. The benefits of the supergrid: it would be high voltage underground, less line loss, use existing right-of-ways because it's buried, much less not in my backyard. We have 2.5 million miles of buried gas and oil pipelines in this country, and nobody bitches about them unless they leak because they can't see them. The grid would be protected from solar flares, shielded from a nuclear electromagnetic pulse. It would be a $1 trillion investment with an ROI of $10 to $15 trillion. We'll be safer, cleaner, a leader in a new energy economy, a model for the world. Perhaps both political parties could come together to make it a reality. The next great American infrastructure project. It will take all forms of energy, whatever is the cheapest and most competitive. You get the power from many sources. More options mean lower cost for consumers. It protects our country's power system, and especially with the growing needs that we have, improving efficiency, providing the power needed, as AI and the huge growth in data centers will greatly increase the demand for electricity. We will be the leader in a new energy economy, not China, because these data centers will go where the energy is the cheapest. And if it's cheapest because you have solar farms and wind farms in Mongolia, those data centers are going to go to China. A project that will be the equivalent to the space program, if not even greater. Here are a couple of other benefits. If you've ever heard of the Carrington event in 1859, the telegraph lines caught fire from the induced current caused by a massive solar flare. And the telegraph line and houses caught on fire. We're so much more independent on electricity now. Our electricity will be off for many months. A nuclear EMP shot by North Korea over Kansas could do the same thing. And our lifestyle would go back 150 years, not for weeks, not for months, for years. But few of us know how to live like pioneers. Virtually all commerce would shut down. Banking, healthcare, food supply would be threatened. A shielded underground grid would protect us from the worst effects of a massive solar flare or an EMP. I'm going to finish with some quotes. Albert Einstein: the significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking with which we created them. Today, our concern must be with the future, for the world is changing. The old era is ending. The old ways will not do. And I had to throw this one in. Take risks now and do something bold. You won't regret it. But I'm going to close because I'd rather close with another one from Kennedy. We stand today on the edge of a new frontier, a frontier of unknown opportunities and perils. It would be easier to shrink back from that new frontier, but the times demand new invention, innovation, imagination, and decision. Our problems are man-made, therefore they can be solved by man. No problem of human destiny is beyond human. We got to the moon in less than a decade. We can build the supergrid with the right leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Oh.